Venus is closer than Mars. It's nearly the same size as Earth. And it's completely unlivable. The surface sits at around 460 degrees Celsius. Pressure, 90 times stronger than Earth's. But Venus has a secret. High above the ground, there's a zone where the numbers change, where pressure drops to something humans can survive, where temperature can feel almost normal. And in that layer, a city could float, not with sci-fi magic, with physics. Because on Venus, air itself can become buoyancy. So today, we're going to build it. A floating city on Venus. Venus looks calm from space, soft clouds, a golden world. But the surface is a trap. The temperature stays around 460 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead, and the pressure is crushing. About 92 Earth atmospheres. That's like living almost a kilometer underwater every second. Any lander that touches the surface doesn't explore, it dies. Metal weakens, electronics cook, batteries fail, and even if you solve the heat and pressure, the air is still poison. Venus is mostly carbon dioxide, with clouds made of sulfuric acid. So colonizing Venus on the ground isn't hard, it's impossible, which means there's only one direction left: up. Here's the twist. Venus has layers, and one of them is almost Earth-like, at about 50 to 60 kilometers high. Pressure drops dramatically, down to around 1 Earth atmosphere, the kind your body was built for. And the temperature changes too. Instead of a furnace, it can sit in a survivable range, sometimes close to room temperature. It's still Venus. Outside is still carbon dioxide. The clouds are still acidic. Winds can still be violent. But the environment stops being instantly fatal. For the first time, the idea becomes real. If you can't live on Venus, you live above it, in the only layer where humans could exist without being crushed. So now the problem isn't science fiction, it's engineering. How do you build a city that never lands? A floating city sounds impossible until you remember buoyancy. Venus helps you because its atmosphere is thick, dense, heavy, mostly carbon dioxide. And when the outside air is heavy, you don't need helium. On Venus, ordinary breathable air is lighter than the air around it. That means the lift comes from the city itself. A massive structure filled with nitrogen and oxygen naturally rises, like a ship floating on water. So the city isn't one balloon, it's a platform, held up by multiple buoyant cells, segmented, redundant, fail-safe. If one section leaks, it seals, it isolates. The city stays airborne, and the design becomes clear. Solar arrays above, habitat modules below, docks on the sides, sensors everywhere, a human island, floating in permanent cloud. Because if the city ever touches the surface, it doesn't crash, it ends. At this altitude, Venus can't crush you anymore, and it can't burn you alive, but it still tries to kill you. Slowly, with chemistry. The clouds are sulfuric acid, a planet-wide corrosive ocean in the sky. So the city is always under attack. Droplets, fog, particles carried by high winds. Acid doesn't need violence, it just needs time. So the first layer of survival is the outer skin. Ceramics, titanium alloys, special polymers, smooth curved surfaces that shed droplets before they can collect. Every external mechanism is sealed. Every vent is filtered. Every intake is protected. Even windows become a liability. Because on Venus, a clear view costs you corrosion. So cameras replace glass. Sensors replace eyes. And then there's the second enemy, the one you can't coat: power loss. A floating city is a life support machine. Electricity is not comfort, it's oxygen. It drives filtration, pressure control, water loops, decontamination systems. Solar power works well above the clouds, so the top of the city becomes a power plant. But Venus has storms, haze, dark cycles. So the city needs a second heart. Compact nuclear modules, shielded, isolated, reliable, plus massive storage. Battery vaults, independent grids per district. Because on Venus, a blackout isn't inconvenience, it's a countdown. Inside the city, the world becomes artificial, not stylish, necessary. Everything you need must be manufactured. Start with air. Outside is carbon dioxide, unbreathable, so the city is sealed and pressurized like a spacecraft. Every breath is recycled, CO2 scrubbed, oxygen replenished, humidity controlled. Filters never stop. Then water. Venus doesn't give you rivers or lakes, so water becomes supply. And chemistry, collected from trace vapor, recovered from waste, purified again and again. Nothing is wasted. Every drop has a history. Now food. Farming isn't soil, it's engineering. Hydroponic towers, LED sunlight, stacked gardens inside pressurized walls. Protein comes from efficiency, fermentation, algae systems, cultured fats. Because the city can't hunt, it can't fish, it can't harvest anything outside. So life depends on systems that never fail. And people trained to treat maintenance as survival. On Earth, nature provides. On Venus, the city provides. On Venus, there are no roads, only wind, an endless atmosphere moving like an ocean. So transport becomes aviation, shuttles between platforms like ships between islands, cargo drones, sealed pods, autonomous convoys through mapped wind layers. Navigation is everything, because clouds hide the ground. The horizon lies. So the city relies on radar, LiDAR, signals between stations, a web of guidance in a moving sky. But even with all of it, failure will happen. And on Venus, failure is never abstract. It starts with a warning, a pressure drift, a corrosion alarm, then the red light. Isolate, doors seal, districts become compartments, because the first rule is containment. You don't save everything, you save what you can seal. Then comes the nightmare scenario. Buoyancy failure, a lift cell ruptures, or multiple cells degrade at once. The city begins to sink, not like falling, like descending into death. As you drop, pressure rises, temperatures climb. Venus begins to reclaim you, so the city fights back. Emergency ballast release, reserve lift cells inflated, non-essential modules detached. The city survives by tearing parts of itself away, and if it can't stabilize, evacuation pods detach and climb. Because no rescue goes downward. Down is not a landing. Down is an ending. So every bolt, every seal, every protocol exists for one mission. Never touch Venus. Not once. Not ever. A floating city on Venus would never tame the planet. It would never terraform it. It would never make the surface safe. It would simply outsmart it by living in the only layer where physics allows it, above the heat, above the pressure, above the world that crushes everything. From below, Venus remains hell. But above the clouds, lights would appear. A human island, a skyline of modules, a civilization hanging in the sky. And the strangest truth is this: Venus is Earth's twin, but the only way to live on it is to never touch it. A city floating above a world of fire, alive, because it learned where to stand.